I think I'd like to call you Mom, 'cause you remind me of my mom. I'm gonna go put on my...
I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
I'm Quinn. Yep, Quinn is here to join us for the new They Might Be Giants review, which is Nanobots, their new album that just came out. Tom, what's the difference between Nanobots and, well, the album we reviewed previously by They Might Be Giants in 2011, Join Us?
Well, the big difference for me is I feel like they went back to kind of the darker, creepier sound that they had in some of their earlier albums. Join Us, I thought the songwriting was very strong, but it was almost a little too, like it didn't really go off the deep end in a way that I really like from these guys, when their lyrics get really quizzical and just kind of demented at times. Right. I feel like they went back to that a little bit here, and the sound palette is just a little bit darker. Like I said, creepier. I like music that scares me. I don't know why. But this is a band that has always been really intriguing to me for that reason. So I was really excited about the return to that kind of sound, but at the same time, I think it would be hard to battle just the consistent, high-quality songwriting that was on Join Us.
Right. Now, if there's one person here that knows a ton about They Might Be Giants, it has to be this guy.
Yeah, whatever that's worth.
You're right. Right. You've been forcing They Might Be Giants on me for at least a decade.
I would like to point out that Jake hated them for a very long time.
I really hated them, and now I really like them. Like, a lot of their albums I go back and listen to on a regular basis. So, so how does this compare to some of their earlier work?
Well, specifically, they are clearly trying to go back and recreate in a lot of different ways Apollo 18. In structure, in sound, and actually they included their first children's song in an adult album, the first time since I think '94.
Wow.
John Henry. Which is strange because they put out so many kids' albums between now and then.
Yeah, they did. You'd think it'd be out of their system, kind of.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't think that it would have been that long since they put on one of their full-length albums.
Yeah, but those have been some of their most successful albums so far. I mean,
won them Grammys, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. But you look back to the albums that did include those, and that's what they're going for here. Specifically, I thought the song "Darlings of Wonderland" or Lumberland. Lumberland.
It was a wonderland for
me.
That was like my favorite track.
This album was a wonderland.
Yeah, kind of.
Anyway,
no John Linell references.
I was holding off. I went there.
Let's not talk about your body.
Darlings of Lumberland, I thought sounded a lot like Hall of Heads, and the second this album actually, the first half kicks off really strong. The second half winds down and goes very creepy, a lot like Apollo 18.
Right.
Some of the very strongest tracks are right away and actually grouped together. I don't know if that was intentional.
I totally agree. For me, like, the first 9 tracks were really solid. There were a couple in there that I didn't like quite as well, but that's kind of where all my track picks was. I mean, Darlings of Lumberland was clearly the highlight of the back half for me, but the album, I want to say it falls apart. I think that's a little too strong of phrasing for it. It's more like it de-evolves.
Right.
It breaks down, the songs get shorter, they get a little more disconnected with those kind of interlude tracks. But even so, despite the interlude tracks, I just think the highlights were in the front half.
It absolutely was. There's definitely 2 sides to this album, and I just wish that they would have made some more continuity within the listening experience. When I was researching this, I actually read on Wikipedia that one of the Johns said that the tracks, the small tracks on the back end weren't made to be exactly like Apollo 18. They're just supposed to cut out the unnecessary verses and choruses. So that's why you see that they're a little bit longer in length. They're just they were developed specifically to be short songs, whereas the fingertips were just the little short tips of fingers, right? So this, I think, plays a little bit differently, and they were clearly going for a listening experience. But to me, like, if you're thinking about the listening experience of an album, you have to consider album flow when you're designing your album. And all they had to do really to fix this is just move a couple of the better tracks on the front half, stick them on the end, and then just have a solid closer. That's really all you would have to do.
I think that would make it a little more consistent.
Yeah, and it's just kind of unfortunate that it did have that break in it, because it's like almost like a record where there's 2 sides to it.
Yeah.
Well, there was 4 tracks in a row that were all clips right in the middle, and that's really where the album hits a wall. After that, it's a different album.
Yeah. I gotta say, Decision Makers have to be the best one.
I was so happy to see they brought their humor back with that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's what cuts the album apart, is that they didn't intersperse those correctly, I thought, anyway.
Right. And Black Ops was kind of humorous. And
yeah, Black Ops is a funny song.
But then, songs like Tesla, I found, like, while I really liked that song, I didn't feel like it fit on the album. And,
no.
That's the
I
song.
felt like they put it on there to hark back to those old days specifically. Not because it fit, but because they were trying to do that.
Yeah, this whole album just kind of feels like they're trying really hard to be old They Might Be Giants, but with a full band sound. And even, even with that full band, I still get, there's a lot of new instrumental varieties on here that you haven't heard in previous albums.
Yeah.
And that's something that I definitely appreciated. It does not sound like a jam band is playing this, where, especially the, releases in the late 90s, it definitely did feel like, a band was playing, where this doesn't.
Yeah.
This is much more studio-oriented.
Yeah,
I
agree with that.
Yeah, and the production I thought was very tight. So that's something like, I really like the sound of this album. I just figure that the songwriting is lacking a bit. I don't know how you guys felt about that, but
I thought that the songwriting was lacking a little bit, and I thought one of the key elements, knowing a lot of their albums and how they write songs, they had another song about writer's block on here.
Oh, right.
When Linell writes about writer's block, generally it's on a weaker album.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
when you think about it.
And overall, I would qualify this as one of the weaker They Might Be Giants albums, but to point out something really specific, and I know that, when you were forcing this down my throat 10 years ago, that this wasn't one of my favorite bands, but this is a band that I've learned to appreciate all the really cool intricacies and all the neat things that they do. And really, they're a band with a scope that no other band has. They're trying to entertain not only, your brain for music, but they're trying to, entertain your brain for, like, mind puzzles and lyric puzzles, especially John Linell. And this album doesn't really focus on that quite as much, like, as Tom alluded to earlier. The puzzles aren't quite as there as in the older work. And I just want more accordion and I want more puzzles. That's really all I want. And it's just not quite there, but I still really like this album. I feel like any They Might Be Giants album, as long, they didn't completely biff it on this one. So I feel like it's still worthwhile to go back and to throw this one on and listen to it. I just don't know if it's going to go down in history as one of their best.
Yeah, I think for me, what would make an ideal They Might Be Giants listen is if you took, like, the songwriting strength and songwriting style of Join Us and put it with the sound of this album.
That's a great point.
I think if you combine those aspects and you would just have a killer, probably one of the best albums that they've put out in a long time. But I didn't quite get that here, but there are still some really cool things that I like about it.
I agree, there weren't enough solid tracks. It felt like they kind of threw almost everything in their session together into an album, which, to be fair to them, they did put out about a year after their previous one.
That's very true. Tom, what are you going to give this one?
I'm giving this a 72.
I'm a little lower than you. I think I'm going to go 69. The track displacement got to me a little bit. Like, I found myself clearly favoring tracks and wanting to skip some of the others, which, not that they were totally, like, I would consider them bad tracks, but I just, it got to the point where I was just like, okay, I'm ready to move on.
Quinn, did you want to give it a score?
It's tough to give it a score because I love them so much, and so I'm so biased. But, if I'm realistically giving a score, I'm probably sitting right in the middle there, about 70, 71.
Okay, cool.
So what's your favorite They Might Be Giants album?
My favorite They Might Be Giants album?
you have to have one.
Oh, that's
Mine's
really hard.
self-titled.
Self-titled is so good. They reinvented themselves so many times. It's like, which is your favorite of an era for me?
Right.
I do like the earlier area. I really like Self-Titled, Flood, and Lincoln a lot.
Lincoln's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lincoln's really good. Apollo 18, though, for me. I really like that one.
Nice. I could just listen to Fingertips all day.
It's just funny sometimes to put your iTunes on shuffle, and then you'll always hit a Fingertips. Eventually, if you listen long enough.
I had that happen last week.
Yeah, it's a monumentous occasion when it happens. It makes your day. What's your guys' favorite They Might Be Giants album, and what did you guys think about Nanobots? Let us know at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and please leave us a comment about what you're listening to in 2013, because you guys are really helping us choose what albums we review. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
I'm Quinn.
We are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.